Hello, users, and welcome back to another episode of Above It All. And I want to start doing more of these kind of like history focused segments where I kind of tie together current events with past events to give you a more broader understanding of the era that we're going through. And today I would like to talk about, I've got this history article here that I'll read, probably just read the whole thing. And there's lots of books about this. There's lots of other materials you can do more studying on this subject if you're interested. But this is how the Nazis were inspired by Jim Crow laws in the United States. This is something you need to understand. The through line of fascism and racism and bigotry of all stripes. It's hard to say where it originated. However, there is a very consistent through line from at least the United States to Nazi Germany and back to the United States. And I would like to talk about this and read the article. Spoiler alert, Hitler thought that the Jim Crow laws were so racist that he could never implement them in Germany. Think about that. In 1935, Nazi Germany passed two radically discriminatory pieces of legislation, the Reich Citizenship Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor. Together, these were known as the Nuremberg Laws, and they laid the legal groundwork for the persecution of Jewish people during the Holocaust and World War II. When the Nazis set out to legally disenfranchise and discriminate against Jewish citizens, they weren't just coming up with ideas out of thin air. They closely studied the laws of another country. According to James Q. Whitman, author of Hitler's American Model, that country was the United States. America, in the early 20th century, was the leading racist jurisdiction of the world, says Whitman, who is a professor at Yale Law School. Nazi lawyers, as a result, were interested in, looked very closely at, and were ultimately influenced by American race law. Again, you got to think about this. The legacy of slavery on this country is absolutely disgusting. And there in the 1860s and 70s, the radical Republicans of the time wanted to push for more equal rights legislation, but they were defeated by the Democrats of the time, and their own, Republican Party just wasn't fully on board with it. You had a few cringers, like the Joe Manchins of that era. And as a result, ever since the Emancipation Proclamation, especially in southern states, the United States of America they basically just created two Americas. They said, all right, we won't enslave you anymore. However, you're not going to live like us. And this is especially notable throughout the New Deal era as well. The New Deal was a gift to white populations. The New Deal is what accelerated wealth gain and wealth ownership for white people and none for black people. The New Deal was racist. And now, the New Deal may have been the best legislation we've had in this country, and FDR may have been the best president we've had in this country, but that is not saying much. Like, that's the thing, is the bar is so low. The first black president, you could make an argument that they were worse for black people than FDR, or especially Abraham Lincoln. And this is something you have to understand. There has always been this extreme toxic relationship between different races in the United States. And this was always brewing in every country, of course. But the United States was special in that it made this law and got away with it for so fucking long. Think about that. Think about that. In particular, Nazis admired the Jim Crow-era laws that discriminated against black Americans and segregated them from white Americans, and they debated whether or not to introduce similar segregation in Germany, yet they ultimately decided that it wouldn't go far enough. One of the most striking Nazi views was that Jim Crow was a suitable racist program in the United States because American blacks were already oppressed and poor, he says. But then, in Germany, by contrast, where the Jews, parents, as the Nazis imagined it, were rich and powerful, it was necessary to take more severe measures. Because of this, Nazis were more interested in how the U.S. had designated Native Americans, Filipinos, and other groups as non-citizens, even though they lived in the U.S. or its territories. These models influenced the citizenship portion of the Nuremberg Laws, which stripped Jewish Germans of their citizenship and classified them as nationals. Think about that in modern times. Think about that. What is Donald Trump doing at this very moment? Oh, you're not allowed to be a citizen. You just live here. You don't have rights. You're not a citizen. Why is immigration so difficult? Why can't you just walk in and just get paperwork and then just start paying and contributing to the taxes in the economy? Why can't you just do that? Why is that not so simple? You'd think, right? Instead of having immigrants get paid slave wages in the United States, that, they walk in, get citizenship, and then they've got full rights. They can start producing and they can start paying taxes. But no. Why is that? Because they're different. They're the other. This new thing just happened that I haven't looked into with the Supreme Court and the DACA program. And Trump is literally, as I record this video, having a meltdown on Twitter about it. And what that program basically said is that if you were here as a child, from what I understand, that you should have a path to citizenship. You should, instead of being a national, have a path to be on equal terms with everyone else. This is what's happening right now. Trump is trying to remove that path to citizenship because he doesn't want these people to be citizens. He doesn't want to help them move back to a different country. There was this story of someone who was born in Iraq and was taken here, by their parents when they were a little boy. They were deported back to Iraq. They could not speak the local language. They knew nobody. They were homeless, and then they died. This is the reason, okay, that these people are being deported, and we literally have concentration camps in the United States. The other day, Trump said that the president of China should build more concentration camps because that's what he would do. Okay? So keep this in mind. But a component of the Jim Crow era that Nazis did think they could translate into Germany were anti-miscegenation laws, which prohibited interracial marriages in 30 of the 48 states. America had, by a wide margin, the harshest law of this kind. Whitman says, in particular, some of the state laws threaten severe criminal punishment for interracial marriage. Keep in mind, there are people alive right now that grew up in the Jim Crow South. This is not the ancient past. This is not thousands of years ago. There are people right now, probably in your family. And if you're white, then maybe they didn't have to go through the problems, but they were at least alive during the Jim Crow era. This is not ancient history. You have to understand that. Where was I? Okay. In particular, some of the state laws threaten severe criminal punishment for interracial marriage. That was something radical Nazis were very eager to do in Germany as well. The idea of banning Jewish and Aryan marriages presented the Nazis with a dilemma. How would they tell who is Jewish and who is not? After all, race and ethnic categories are socially constructed, and interracial relationships produce offspring who don't fall neatly into one box. Again, the Nazis looked to America. Connected with these anti-miscegenation laws was a great deal of American jurisprudence. I do not know what that word means, but I will look it up after this video is over, so you can assure yourself. I recommend looking that up as well. On how to classify who belonged to which race, he says. Controversial one-drop rules stipulated that anybody with any black ancestry was legally black and could not marry a white person. Laws also defined what made a person Asian or Native American in order to prevent these groups from marrying whites. Notably, Virginia had a Pocahontas exception for prominent white families who claimed to be descendants from Pocahontas. Jesus. The Nuremberg laws, too, came up with a system of determining who belonged to what group, allowing the Nazis to criminalize marriage and sex between Jewish and Aryan people. Rather than adopting a one-drop rule, the Nazis decreed that a Jewish person was anybody who had more or 3 or more Jewish grandparents. I am sorry, I cannot speak. I am dyslexic. Which means, as Whitman notes, that American radical classification law was much harsher than anything the Nazis themselves were willing to introduce in Germany. It should come as no surprise that the Nazis weren't uniformly condemned in the United States. Look at the Olympics that happened in Berlin during Nazi Germany. Please, maybe I'll make a video on this too. Look at what publications in the United States were saying about the Nazi fucking Olympics. Think about that. I'll do more videos on this stuff, I think. The Nazis were not uniformly condemned in the US before the country entered the war. In the early 1930s, American eugenicists welcomed Nazi ideas about racial purity and republished their propaganda. American aviator Charles Lindbergh accepted a swastika medal from the Nazi Party in 1938. Once the U.S. entered the war, it took a decidedly anti-Nazi stance. But black American troops noticed the similarities between the two countries and confronted them head-on with a double V campaign. Its goal? Victory abroad against the Axis powers and victory at home against Jim Crow. Imagine you're a black man in the South, and you are conscripted to fight in World War II against Nazis. Why? Because they were doing things to their people that your own country was doing to you and your family. Imagine that. And again, I want to tie this around to what's happening now. We currently are having these concentration camps at the border that people are just forgetting about. There were these big news during the midterms, and then now all of a sudden, people just forgot. I haven't seen any Democrat talk about concentration camps in a long time. I wonder why. We have Trump on Twitter right now, as I'm recording this video, right now. Trump is crying on Twitter that the Supreme Court would not let him enforce a racist law. And you want to know why? Because he tried to implement the law the wrong way. The law is not illegal that he was trying to do. The way he went about it was the illegal part. If Trump gets reelected, he can just try again. And that's the problem here. I'm going to do another video on Trump and the Trump campaign using Nazi imagery in their ad campaigns online. That's going to be a video I'm probably going to make right after this one or maybe later today. I don't know. This is not a coincidence. Another thing you have to know, when America defeated Nazi Germany, they took a lot of Nazi scientists and doctors back to the United States and said, if you do things for us, we'll look over the fact that you were Nazis. And these people integrated into society. They had families. Maybe they all said in public, yeah, I was just following orders. I couldn't help it. But in private, you damn well know that more of them that would say it in public would definitely say that they are proud Nazis in private. This is something you have to understand. The Southern strategy, the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan, utilized the racist, fucking anger in the South. The Southern strategy. They utilized this because of Martin Luther King and the whole 1965 civil rights movement. They got mad. They were like, what the fuck? We can't be racist anymore? Keep in mind, during the civil rights movement, Nazis from Germany were in society. Keep this in mind. They were in government. They were close to people in government. Keep this in mind. So, another thing to keep in mind is Richard Nixon. Why did the drug war start in the United States? According to Richard Nixon's aides, the drug war started basically as a way to make sure that blacks and hippies couldn't vote against the Republican Party. This was one of the ways that they would put through the Southern strategy to switch racists from Democrats to Republicans. Well, if black people get thrown in jail for smoking weed, they can't vote against us. If hippies get thrown in jail because they're smoking weed, they can't vote against us. And what happened? By 1980, Ronald fucking Reagan. And what happened since then? Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm sure you know more about recent history than you do about, what happened in the ancient past of 1950s and 1980s and that era. But, there are people alive right now that were aides to the Nixon administration that helped them craft the modern day drug war. There are people alive right now that came from Nazi Germany, or at least their children came, their parents in this case, came from Nazi Germany and still were Nazis. And there are people right now that were raised by Nazis. And then Nazis combined with people that lived in the Jim Crow era and wish they could go back. And then people that fought in the Confederate War, those family lineages. Those are my heritage. It's my heritage, bro. And this culminates in Donald Trump having concentration camps, advocating for the president of China to have concentration camps. Again, I'm going to do more of these historical analyses, trying to weave together, especially Nazi Germany to the modern times. But just, come on, man. Come on, man. Anyway, hopefully you thought this video was good. I made a few mistakes, but I do one take. I'm a one taker. I like doing off the cuff, one take. Maybe I'll do slight note preparation, but I'm going to be honest. I've done 545 videos. For Above It All, I have not once taken notes yet. I'm open to it, but I have not. This is all just in my brain and what I'm reading on the screen that's displayed. But you have to understand that this is nothing new. This is not shocking. Anybody who's shocked by this is somebody you should be very skeptical of, to say the least. And if Donald Trump does get reelected, I fear the fucking worst. Anyway, thank you for watching. Go watch some of these other videos. Check them out. Share it. Blah, blah, blah. Like, subscribe. Give me money on Patreon. Please, for the love of God, I want to buy more weed. So give me money on Patreon. Thank you.